Well, I am Pablo Accuosto. I am part of the large-scale text understanding systems lab at Universitat Pompeu Fabra, and I'm going to present our paper, Argumentation Mining in Scientific Literature, from computational linguistics to biomedicine. So this is our presentation outline, which I will skip to save some time. In our laboratory, we are interested in developing resources for the automatic prediction of the argumentative structure of scientific abstracts. And this is an area of work in which we've been working for the past 3 years. And we are interested in this because of its potential applications, including, for instance, the automatic assessment of some quality dimensions of scientific texts. And from an information retrieval point of view, also, I mean, there's some tools that can be developed, for instance, to identify evidence given to confirm or deny a given certain scientific claim. Our specific contributions in this work are twofold. On one hand, I will present an annotation scheme that we developed and that we used to annotate a corpus of 510 abstracts in 2 domains, computational linguistics and biomedicine. And we annotated the rhetoric roles of sentences and also argumentative and discourse relations between them. And we used this corpus to train models in order to predict the argumentative structure of scientific abstracts in different settings that I will describe later. So our main motivations for this line of work are twofold. On one hand, because we identify that there is a shortage of tools and resources for argument mining in scientific texts. And also, we have identified a gap between the discourse and rhetoric levels of analysis that we would like to contribute to bridge. So, in terms of the first motivation, I mean, the argument mining has been increasingly recognized as a relevant research area in NLP, and there are many works working on various types of texts doing argument mining, for instance, legal documents, online discussions, Wikipedia articles, news, student essays, etc. But there are very few works that target argument mining in scientific texts, and this is partially because of the inherent argumentative complexity and ambiguity of this type of texts. So in terms of the other motivation, of course, many of you might be familiar with the pioneer work by Simone Teufel and the argumentative zoning annotation scheme, which allows to analyze the argumentative and rhetoric elements used by the author of a text in order to persuade a potential reader about the values, the relevance of their contributions, for instance, by comparing with previous work in the area. The problem with this type of annotations is that we don't have relations between the identified components. So for long or complex texts, it is difficult to get an idea of the argumentative structure. And for instance, it is difficult to know which evidence is used to support which claims. On the other hand, we have the discourse level annotations, where the annotation units are elementary discourse units, which are not always relevant from a rhetoric point of view. And we have, in this case, we do have relations, but the problem is that as we have too many units, so we also have too many relations and very different types of relations, which makes that this task is very costly and very time demanding. So it is very difficult to annotate with this type of scheme, and the models trained with these annotations do not perform so well, so they can be really used in practice, or let's say that their applicability for real-life applications is limited. So we are proposing an annotation scheme that tries to get the best of both worlds. We annotate units mostly at the sentence level with rhetoric roles, and we also annotate relations between them. But we are interested in particular in the relations and the elements that are meaningful from an argumentative point of view. We, of course, are interested in leveraging existing resources available at rhetoric or discourse annotations levels, and to establish links with those previous efforts. So this is part of an ongoing work. As I said, we had previously done a pilot annotation experiment with 60 abstracts in computational linguistics, in which we annotated argumentative units. In that case, we annotated at the sub-sentence level, and with relations between them. And we conducted some experiments with them, including, for instance, experiments at the discourse level. And we observed that infusing discourse knowledge into the models, the argumentative mining models, could be beneficial. I mean, the models performed better. We also conducted some pilot experiments showing that the argumentative structure of abstracts improves the prediction of acceptance and rejection of manuscripts in computational linguistics and machine learning conferences in particular. So in this case, the specific contributions of this work, as I said, is an annotation scheme and a corpus that we annotated with it. The corpus contains 510 abstracts in two domains: computational linguistics and biomedicine. The computational linguistics abstracts are 225 abstracts from SciDTB. SciDTB is a corpus developed by Yang, and sorry, I forgot to include the reference, from Yang and Li from the Peking University. And it's a subset of the ACL anthology. So we designed, let's say, and refined our annotation scheme with this set of abstracts, and then applied it to the annotation of 285 abstracts in biomedicine, which are abstracts obtained from PubMed and were part of a previous work by our co-author Mariana Neves. That she used them for the evaluation of argumentation in biomedical domain. So in this case, we decided to annotate at the sentence level, which simplifies the annotation. And this is because in 93% of the cases in our previous experiment, we observed that the annotation units were actually sentences. So we leave the intra-sentence relation, the identification of intra-sentence relations, as a second step in an argument mining pipeline. So in our annotation scheme, we have 11 types of units that can be grouped into coarse-grained types, such as proposals, outcomes, methods, motivations, and then we have other 4 units that are not so relevant from an argumentative point of view. And then we have 6 types of relations, of which 3 are the most relevant from an argumentative, that convey more argumentative meaning, let's say. So the process and the results that we obtained in this annotation. In computational linguistics, as I said, we annotated 225 abstracts, and these were annotated by 3 annotators in 3 rounds. We have a first round of training, and then refinement of the annotation scheme, and the final round of which was properly the annotations. And then in bio, we annotated 220 and 285 abstracts. In this case, we had 2 annotators, and we had only 1 annotation round. And this is because the two annotators had already participated in the annotation of the computational linguistics abstract, so it wasn't necessary to have the training phase. In both cases, we have an overlap of the annotated abstracts in order to compute the inter-annotator agreement. In this table, we show the agreement in terms of the Cohen's kappa, and also we show the accuracy. For computational linguistics, when we have three annotators, we show the average, the average of the pairwise scores. In the case of the accuracy, we consider one as the correct, let's say, notation. We can see that in computational linguistics, we get a substantial agreements. And in the case of bio, the agreements range from moderate to substantial, depending on the task, which is to some degree expected as the abstracts in biomedicine are considerably more complex. For instance, if we look at the number of units, the number of sentences in this case per abstract, we see that while in CL we have an average of 5.3 sentences, in bio we have a 9.8, and also we have more words in each sentence. So in terms of the experiments that we want to do with our corpus, we have defined 4 tasks. On one hand, we want to identify the type of the units. On the other hand, we want to, given 2 units, decide whether there is a relation between them and the direction of this relation. Also, we want to label these relations, and we also want to identify the main unit, the unit that conveys more information about the content of the abstract. So in terms of the settings, we used also BERT encoders. In particular, well, we used the SciBERT, in this case, the cased version with its own vocabulary, and we used a high-phase transformance implementation. We trained the models both in single multitask settings, and we compare the F1 scores in 5, 10, and 15 epochs, which is more than what we usually see in papers that use BERT. And this is because the multitask settings in particular, we need more time for the models to perform well. So these are the results that we get in the computational linguistics corpus, where we see that in both settings, so multitask and single task, in general, we get good results. For the prediction of the type of units, in general, in the multitask setting, we get better results. And this is because, I mean, it's easier, let's say, to predict the type when we have some information about the relations. In the case of bio, we also get good results, not so as good, but in this case, most of the tests are perform better in the multitask setting. In this case, not only the type of units, but also the type of the relations improve in this when considering the multitask setting. So having these results, we asked ourselves, to what extent the representation learned from these annotations in one subset, in one discipline, for instance, in computational linguistics, are independent of the specific domain, the specific language and characteristics of the training texts. So to explore this question, what we did was to keep the encoders fixed, so to train the models with one subset, and then to use this encoder to try to predict the argumentative structure in the other discipline, in this case, in bio. So by training and on top of the encoders, very simple linear classifiers. So we compare this with using the SciBERT directly as an encoder. And we see that when we use the model fine-tuned with the computational linguistics abstracts, we get substantially better results, which means would mean that the model trained with computational linguistics abstracts to some degree encodes knowledge about the argumentative structure of the abstracts that's independent of the specific domain and the specific characteristics of the texts. So in conclusion, in this work, we proposed a new sentence level annotation scheme for the identification of argumentative units and relations in scientific abstracts. We applied this scheme to annotation of more than 500 documents into highly specialized domains. And well, we made available the resulting corpus as well as the code that we used. And the results obtained, as we said, encourage us to think that although the annotation scheme was originally developed and refined for the computational linguistics domain, it can be successfully applied to other scientific disciplines such as biomedicine. And as a follow-up to this work, we will basically replicate the experiments that we did in our with our pilot annotations in terms of transferring knowledge from discourse to arguments, and also the quality assessment experiment, in particular focusing on some quality dimensions that are more relevant from an argumentative point of view. We are also interested in continue exploring some domain adaptation techniques, not only using a scientific text, but also probably other textual genres for which more annotated data is available. Okay, thank you very much.